The intelligence that I've seen gives me great confidence in their assessment that the Russians carried out this hack.
Which hack?
The hack of the DNC and the hack of John Podesta. Now, but again, I think this is exactly why I want the report out, so that everybody can review it. And this has been briefed, and the evidence in closed session has been provided on a bipartisan basis. Not just to me, it's been provided to the leaders of the House and the Senate and the chairman and ranking members of the relevant committees. And I think that what you've already seen is at least some of the folks who've seen the evidence don't dispute, I think, the basic assessment that the Russians carried this out.
But specifically, would you not say
well, Martha, I think what I want to make sure of is that I give the intelligence community the chance to gather all the information, but I'd make a larger point, which is not much happens in Russia without Vladimir Putin.
CNN's Sunil Srifati is joining us now with more. Sunil, the president also spoke about Donald Trump and the transition.
That's right. And what we saw from President Obama today, Wolf, is he really tried to downplay this rift that's going on between his administration and the incoming Trump administration, saying transitions, they just are not always smooth, sometimes that they are bumpy. This is an acknowledgement that even with this immediate post-election promise from both sides that they would try to work together, that this week it has turned ugly.
Tonight, President Obama, for the first time, addressing the spat between his White House and the incoming Trump administration.
There hasn't been a lot of squabbling. What we've simply said is the facts.
Attempting to lower the temperature.
My hope is that the president-elect is going to similarly be concerned with making sure that we don't have potential foreign influence in our election process. I don't think any American wants that. And that shouldn't be a sort of an argument.
Amid an unusual public rift that's pitted the outgoing White House spokesman against the incoming president-elect.
Mr. Trump was obviously aware of the fact that Russia was engaged in malicious cyber activity.
This foolish guy, Josh Earnest, I don't know if he's talking to President Obama. He is so bad, the way he delivers a message.
And Trump advisors taking shots directly at the president.
You know, if you want to shut this down and you actually love the country enough to have this peaceful transition in our great democracy between the Obama administration and the Trump administration.
The war of words between the outgoing and incoming administrations, a sharp departure from the immediate post-election vow to work together that the president echoed again today.
That we have done everything we can to make sure that they are successful, as I promised, and that will continue. And it's just been a few days since I last talked to the president-elect.
The president-elect today turning the attention back to Hillary Clinton's emails, tweeting, "Are we talking about the same cyber attack where it was revealed that head of the DNC illegally gave Hillary the questions to the debate?" Hillary Clinton telling donors in New York Thursday night that the Russian president's involvement in the hack was a personal beef against her, touting herself as someone who was tough on Putin, a jab at the president-elect.
So in the fall of 2011, they had, quote, parliamentary elections, which were so flawed, so illegitimate, that it was embarrassing. I was your Secretary of State. At least in those years, we stood up for democracy and human rights.
Meantime, her campaign chairman, John Podesta, out with a scathing takedown of the FBI, scolding them for not investigating the Russian hack as aggressively as they did Clinton's emails, writing, comparing the FBI's massive response to the overblown email scandal with a seemingly lackadaisical response to the very real Russian plot to subvert a national election shows that something is deeply broken at the FBI.
And President Obama did not say whether he agrees with Hillary Clinton that the hacking influenced the election's outcome, just that he thinks she was treated unfairly during the election. And as for the president-elect, beyond his tweet this morning about all of this, he has been pretty silent for him by his standards. He is now headed to Orlando, where he typically, we see him have these sort of campaign-style rallies and respond to what's on his mind in news of the day. So we'll see if he does that later tonight.
We certainly will. Sunil Srifati, thanks very much for that report. Let's get some more on all of this. Former Republican Congressman Jack Kingston is joining us. He was a senior advisor to the Trump campaign. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
Why do you believe the president-elect won't accept the conclusions of the intelligence community, the law enforcement community, the CIA, the FBI, the president of the United States, that Russia is clearly behind these cyber attacks?
Well, I think that what he wants to do is tamp down the discussion, let the House appropriate committees, Devin Nunes, for example, and Richard Burr in the Senate, let them do their investigation. The president today said that he had talked to Putin, and later he said that there was no further interference in the process, and he also said that the hacks were limited to the DNC and to John Podesta. So there's still a question to me if there was any interference in the election, particularly any motivation or suggestion of a results change.
But you believe the Russians did hack the DNC and the Clinton campaign chairman, John Podesta. They then released all those emails to WikiLeaks to embarrass Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democrats. You believe that, right?
Well, I don't know what their motivation may have been, and I don't know that it was the Russians personally, because I haven't been briefed on that, Wolf, but I do know this, that when you hack into something, you can always make it look like it was somebody else. There's layers and layers of footprints and false avenues, and just the way the hackers do it, it's very hard to figure out who did it and when they did it, and certainly why they did it. But you know, Wolf, one of the things that's disturbing to me is there is a narrative out there. We've heard it. At first it was not my president. He didn't win the popular vote. Now Hollywood left is doing ads telling electors not to vote for President Trump. And that is disturbing. I think that what's really the more outrageous thing is that the CIA and the FBI refused to meet with the House Intelligence Committee this week. I mean, that to me is very bothersome. We have to take the politics out of this and let the proper committees look at this in a cool way. But I also have to say this, Wolf, where was the president and where was this outrage back in October? If the intelligence community was disturbed about it, why did they go about it quietly, as they're now saying? There should have been it should have been a national front stage discussion.
Let me point out to you that on October 7th of last year, a month before the election, there was a joint statement from the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Homeland Security in which they said flatly, quote, "The U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations," a reference to the DNC. They also said, "We believe, based on the scope and sensitivity of these efforts, that only Russia's senior-most officials could have authorized these activities." Today we heard the president say, for all practical purposes, that was Putin, the senior-most Russian official. So they did come out with a statement that the president authorized them to deliver in early October.
But why wasn't the president making a bigger deal about it? He seems to make it a very big deal right now. And we hear from leaders of the Democrat Party that electors should be briefed on this. That suggests politics. The president in October should have done something about it. He said earlier, and you showed the clip, that at the G20 he pulled Putin to the side and said, "Cut it out." Well, what kind of talk is that? You don't pull somebody to the side. You say, "Listen, I want to meet with you. I'm going to come to Moscow. I'll meet you in Geneva. I'll do whatever it takes. But you're going to stop this, and we're going to do something about it. We're going to do something about it now."
You also heard the president say when he told Putin in early September at the G20 summit, "Cut it out," he said after that threat to Putin, because he said the U.S. could retaliate in various ways. They've got pretty good capabilities. There was no interference with the voting booth, if you will, with any of the election systems, any of that. There's been some other hacking that's been going on, but none of that occurred to tamper with the actual vote. You heard the president say that.
Yes, but it seems like he wants it both ways. Number one, he wants to take credit for that conversation, stopping further interference in the U.S. election. If that's the case, then the headline should say, President Obama stopped this in September. The second headline should say something he said today that was very important. He said this wasn't a complicated, sophisticated espionage. This was everyday hacking. Well, everyday hacking, unfortunately, goes on in the world today. What about when President Clinton in July of 2015, President Obama was shown to have Angela Merkel's schedule? and other nations around the world apparently were spied on by the
So,
U.S. today.
bottom
And I'm not
line-
saying that's right. I'm just saying that he said this was everyday hacking, and you know, we got to stop everyday hacking. But that's one of his statements today.
You know with the criticism you're going to get, Congressman, that you're offering excuses for Putin and the Russians. I'm sure you've heard that already, but are you bracing for more when you say these kinds of things?
What we're saying is that we need to take the politics out of this. The CIA needs to do what it has to do by constitutional duty, and that's to show up in front of the U.S. Congress and not play politics as they did this week. I, as a former House member, was outraged to read that the head of the CIA says to Devin Nunes, the House Intelligence Chairman, that they were unable to meet because they were too busy with the investigation on behalf of Barack Obama. That's absurd. You and I have been around this town long enough to know when politics are being played. That was extremely politics. We need to get the politics out of this so that we can have an intelligent conversation.
Former Congressman Jack Kingston joining us. Congressman, thanks very much.
Thank you, Wolf.
More breaking news coming up next. The political power grab, some compare to a coup unfolding tonight in North Carolina. Details of an extraordinary bill that has just become law.